Kick it off.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the session today. The topic is energy adaptation and community resiliency resources, opportunities, and best management practices for tribal communities. We're excited to have you here today at the EPA annual conference. A little bit of a different format. This is my first time joining the conference so far, and yeah, just excited to have you, and we'll just dive right in. So we'll start with some presentation. We'll start with a few introductions of the main presenters, and then we'll move on to the agenda. So John, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Flores. I'm the Environmental Director and Water Manager for the San Pasqual Band of Indians. I've been working for the tribe since 2011, and I've had the pleasure of working on a number of projects for the tribe, as well as with Joshua Simmons throughout the years.
Thanks, John. Shasta? I can't see or hear you. There you go.
My name is Shasta Gaughen. I am the Environmental Director and also the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Paula Band of Mission Indians. And I've been doing a lot of work with all of the presenters today on some great projects. I'm glad to be here to discuss them with you.
Thank you, Shasta. Angie.
Hi, everybody. Angie Hacker with Prosper Sustainably, and I also have a role with the state as the Energy Efficiency Best Practices Coordinator. We're going to talk today a little bit more about our tribal programs that we run through Prosper Sustainably in collaboration with our tribal partners.
Great, and I'm Josh Simmons with Prosper Sustainably as well, and I'm involved with everybody on various projects that we'll touch upon today during this presentation. And here's our agenda. I see that everybody's already started introducing themselves and their tribe. I really appreciate that. One thing that'd be great too is if you can share your biggest challenge, climate or energy related challenge, and or what you want to learn today. And hopefully Suzanne or somebody can help remind us when we get to the appropriate point to review and address any of those concerns. But hopefully we cover a lot of what you're interested in today. After we get to the agenda, we're first going to just quickly touch upon some California Strategic Growth Council and CEC specific energy and climate initiatives, and then we'll have the leads on those programs introduce themselves. And then the meat of it, we'll dive in the meat of it. We'll first focus on climate adaptation and resilience, resources, opportunities, and best management practices, move on to energy, and then we'll wrap up with questions in the conclusion. We encourage you to ask your questions using the chat box throughout the presentation, and Suzanne from the EPA will be monitoring those, and we'll ask those at the appropriate time. And if it's not asked during the presentation, then we'll come back to it at the end, and we'll try to allow 5 or 10 minutes at the end if it looks like there are questions waiting for us. So I would like to hand it over to Tom Gates and Leah. And I'm still not sure whether Tom is here or not.
I think Tom is on, but having audio issues. So Tom, are you there? If not, I can just cover.
I just admitted him. He was in the waiting room. So we got to keep, I guess, admitting people. Tom, are you with us? Tom Gates?
He texted me he's having audio issues, Josh. So.
Okay, then Leah, take it away.
And Tom, just jump in if you figure it out. So my name is Leah Fisher. I work for the California Strategic Growth Council, which is an interagency body with the state. I know some of our team is also on from both the Strategic Growth Council and the California Energy Commission. So it's nice to have folks here. And I'm really excited by how many people are on today. So I'm just going to really briefly say kind of where the funding came from to do this gap analysis that Josh and Angie will talk more about. We're also doing a tribal government challenge planning grant program. So the Energy Commission has some federal funds left over from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act from a while back that they needed to spend quickly. So they came to us at the Strategic Growth Council. We're partnering completely partnered to get this to get the funding out and now to administer the projects. So the planning grants first are in the process of being awarded to 8 tribes that are working on a variety of energy and climate related planning initiatives. All the priorities there were tribally driven, and we're really excited to see those funds get some of these projects hopefully off the ground. For the gap analysis, as they'll talk about, we are looking, as it says here, to get a snapshot as much as we can of tribal priorities, needs, and barriers. We're really excited to hear recommendations for the state for programs, funding, technical assistance that's needed. We want to learn from this and see how we can work better with California Native American tribes, federally recognized and not, for any future initiatives that may come from the state. We're also, because we're an interagency body, planning to bring in our member agencies, the tribal liaisons, and definitely keep them posted and see how these results can have a bigger impact just further beyond our 2 agencies. And Tom, I want to see if you have anything to add, if you managed to get your audio on. And also, I don't know, Josh, if there's time for questions, or we can converse over email as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. Yeah, it's fairly brief. So I would say, people can enter their questions in the chat and Leah can address it more. Tom, are you available? Did you want to say anything? Okay, well, we'll assume that Tom is still having audio issues. I skipped back a slide real quick just because we've had more people join. And again, I appreciate everybody introducing themselves in the chat, and we're encouraging you to share a big challenge in energy and climate or what you want to learn about today. I do want to also point out that, this is broadly applicable to EPA Region 9, or there's federal opportunities that are applicable to all tribes that we're going to discuss. But there is going to be an emphasis on some California-specific opportunities as well, and the tribes we're working with are all based in California.
Josh, there's one question. Folks want to know if you're going to be putting the PowerPoint into the thread. I know it's being recorded, but.
You know what? When I hand it over, I can I'll add it to the slides.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
And just coming back to the last slide. So we just got our landing page up for the California Tribal Gap Analysis Project. We do have some events. The one missing thing is the email subscription widget, which should be up by the end of the day. So we encourage you to go here if you're in California and interested in participating and learning more. Please come here at caltribalgapanalysis.org and sign up, or feel free to email us or contact us for more information. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Angie and Shasta now, who are going to discuss the climate adaptation and resilience aspects of this presentation.
All right, hello again, everyone. Josh, are you able to hear and see me?
Yes.
All right. So again, I'm Angie Hacker with Prosper Sustainably, and we are obviously going to learn a lot more about climate adaptation and resilience resource opportunities and best practices through that tribal gaps analysis that we just covered. But what Shasta and I are going to do today is talk to you a little bit more about what we know as of today about opportunities and resources that can benefit tribal communities that are working on preparing for climate change. Go ahead and change the slide. So our goal with this little portion of the presentation is to help make EPI Region 9 tribes aware of several existing initiatives, resources, best practices, and opportunities that can help them prepare for and adapt to climate exposures. And what we know about the Southwest region here is that tribes are generally experiencing, to different levels, temperature extremes, wildfires, storms and flooding, and drought, along with a lot of secondary exposures that are cascade from these primary exposures, and a host of impacts to their natural environment, built environment, health, social, and cultural environments. And today we're really going to focus on 2 topics. We're going to talk about key initiatives that are serving the region that can help folks prepare for these types of impacts, and then we'll talk a little bit about activities at Paula, San Pasqual, and Rincon that we are working on through Prosper Sustainably with these partners. And so just to give you a little insight into where these tribes are located, you see the map there on the right. Those 3 tribes that we are going to talk a little bit more about, Paula, Rincon, and San Pasqual, you see on the red stars. Those are in northern San Diego County here in California. go ahead and advance. And so I'm going to breeze pretty high level and pretty quickly through some resources that we have compiled as part of some of the initiatives we're going to talk about in a little bit. And these are initiatives and resources that are serving the Southwest region that are related to climate resilience. And so we'll start with the federal level, and these are some things that folks probably know a little bit about, but we want to make sure this is on your list as you're starting to do more climate resilience within your tribal community. One thing that you should have on your sort of key resource list is the 4th National Climate Assessment. So this is a key piece of literature developed at the national level. There's a nationwide climate assessment, and there's also a Southwest chapter that you might want to familiarize yourself with because it does a good job of outlining some of the key information and findings associated with impacts, risks for adaptation in this region. There's also something to be aware of, a chapter called Tribes and Indigenous Peoples. That's a chapter devoted specifically to impacts and risks for tribes associated with climate change. And some of you may be familiar with the woman featured here on the left. This is Althea Walker. She is the tribal liaison with the Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. There are actually tribal liaisons all throughout the country that are funded to support tribes that are working on climate change and providing access to data and scientific information to help them proceed with vulnerability assessments and adaptation plans and similar activities. You should also be aware, if you aren't already, that the Bureau of Indian Affairs also has a tribal resilience program. Generally, this would be a good place to go to see what other tribes are doing in the area of climate resilience. There is a resource guide that kind of shares a lot of information at the federal level that you might have might be able to access. And an important thing for folks on the phone to know is that some key funding opportunities actually come from the BIA Tribal Resilience Program. And so that's part of how some of the work that we're going to talk about a little later is funded. And each year there has been a solicitation for various kinds of tribal resilience activities, including training and adaptation planning. And so if you're looking for a way to get started, tracking the Tribal Resilience Program funding opportunities is a good place to start. It's also important to know that there is something called the Southwest Climate Hub. It's operated by the USDA. Another place to go for some key information and some assistance associated with the tribes can go to for your climate information needs. And another program at the federal level you may want to be aware of is called the Climate Ready Tribes, and that's actually funded through the National Indian Health Board, which gets its funds from the Center for Disease Prevention and Control, CDC, and has served to fund several tribes throughout the country on health-related adaptation efforts. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what that has meant for the Paula Band of Mission Indians, who is one of the recipients. Can you advance the slide? Great. So let's talk a little bit at the state level. For our purposes, we are keenly familiar with those resources in California, so that's mainly what I'm going to talk to you about. As there is a climate assessment at the national level, there's also one at the state level in California. So California is now on its 4th climate assessment. Within that assessment, you can find statewide summaries, you can find regional reports. So each region in California has its own report on various impacts and strategies. And there is a specific summary report for tribal and indigenous communities within California. Josh and Leah already talked to you about the Tribal Government Challenge program that's being operated by the California Energy Commission and Strategic Growth Council. We bring this to your attention because it's fairly new, and it has has solicited and awarded funding for several tribal programs that are sustainability, energy, and climate change related. And so that's another key source of funding if you're looking for resources to build capacity to do this kind of work. Also want to mention one of our key partners, California Department of Public Health. They have a climate change and health equity program that has a lot of great resources. They offer county climate health profiles as well as an adaptation planning toolkit for public health professionals. And there is a database they call Climate Change and Health Vulnerability Indicators for California. That's pretty handy to use and does a good job of helping folks look at the health impacts of climate change and how it might be affecting their particular community. I'll also mention Cal OES, another organization that's doing great things at the state level. They offer a California Adaptation Planning Guide that was recently released, and they have webinars going on currently at the state level to help you learn about what the state recommends doing for adaptation planning, and there's some guidance there that could be applicable for tribes. They also have a website called My Hazards that provides data on hazard information. I'll also mention California Office of Environmental Health and Hazards, and they have some tribal initiative actually on the indicators of climate change. And maybe Shasta, I'll stop here for a second, and you are a advisor on that, and I wonder if you might be able to talk a little bit about your role there and what that initiative is doing.
Sure. So thanks for reminding me that that's on my list of projects. I am a part of the, I guess you'd say it, not the planning team necessarily, but the advisory group for the indicators of climate change and the impacts on tribes for California. And we are in the midst of planning a, as always, virtual meeting that's going to take place on December 2nd and 3rd this year, where there is going to be the opportunity for folks to participate in that and talk about some of the indicators of climate change that they're experiencing and what some of the impacts are on their communities. And so that's what makes this an important opportunity for us to be able to talk to those folks at the state level and identify things that maybe your typical climate change impact assessment would not identify, because as we all know, the needs of tribes are unique. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to go beyond just the typical impacts that people tend to talk about when they talk about climate change, the kind of the cliches like sea level rise and wildfire, which of course is very important if you're on the coast, and for all of California right now, everything's on fire. But there are some specific things that we're trying to get into the mix. So that's where I come in on this. And we don't have yet an agenda, or I don't even think there's a landing page yet for the conference, but that's something that we'll be sharing with people as soon as it's available. And I also just wanted to briefly mention, since we're talking about California, but there was a question from Cliff Benuelos further up in the chat about whether we knew of anything like this, climate change assessments in California that involve tribes. I think your question, Cliff, has probably been answered, and I'll be talking a little bit more in a little bit about the role I had in the summary report for California's 4th climate assessment. But California is kind of on the cutting edge with this stuff, and Arizona and Nevada maybe not as much, but hopefully we can provide some resources maybe to help you out with your process in Nevada.
Right, so Shasta was one of the co-authors on this chapter for the California Climate Assessment. And so Shasta's pretty much involved, got her hands on probably more committees than any human should possibly be on, but she's wonderful and a good resource. I also just want to mention a few databases that folks should be aware of as they're working on climate resilience and adaptation. So things like the California Climate Tracker, CalAdapt, CHAT, which is a California heat assessment tool. There are a lot of resources in California to help folks better understand some meaningful information about their climate impacts and vulnerabilities. Okay, advance the slide, please. And I don't want to leave out some other tribal serving organizations that aren't necessarily federal or state. So folks are familiar with the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, ITEP, and they have a lot of resources associated with climate change that would certainly serve folks in the EPA Region 9 area. They have a whole tribes and climate change program. Folks might have very recently participated in the National Tribal and Indigenous Climate Conference that happened just last month. There's also a tribal adaptation planning toolkit. So there's a few organizations that are trying to provide guidance on adaptation planning. including the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute. And this is another national scale document that was developed to provide guidance for tribal climate adaptation work. All right, go ahead and advance that slide. And so this is a initiative that Shasta and I are leading. This is under the Paula Band of Mission Indians. It's called the Tribal Climate Health Project. And Shasta, do you want to give an overview of this?
Sure. So the Tribal Climate Health Project began in, I can't think of time before COVID. So sometime in the past, I want to say 2017, it was when we first received funding from EPA, a 5-year grant to develop this program to provide data and resources and training to tribes throughout the United States on how to identify climate vulnerabilities and create adaptation plans that had a focus on what the health effects are of climate change. So on top of heat and drought and all those other impacts that we find, what are those impacts on the actual physical and mental and cultural health of tribes, and how can we help people plan for those, identify those things and plan for those things. And actually now I remember it wasn't 2017, it was 2016, because in the first year of our grant from EPA, we all know what happened in November of 2016. The world came to an end as far as the administration is concerned, and that meant the end of our funding. So even though the grant was technically not stopped, it just wasn't funded for the next 4 years. And so we were very fortunate that we were able to get funding from BIA, from National Indian Health Board, from some California granting agencies, and were able to cobble together what we needed to continue the project. And we're still at it. Some of you who are on the webinar, I saw some of your names. You've been really great participants in our multiple webinar series and have probably been to our YouTube page and our website to be able to view those videos on your own. We have a self-paced training for climate vulnerability assessments and adaptations focused on health. So I will put the website in the chat box, and I recommend you take a look and then reach out to me or Angie anytime with questions about it.
Thanks, Shasta. And so, the two main components of the Tribal Climate Health Project are trainings and companion tools and data development. And the whole goal is to build capacity for tribes that may not have the internal capacity to do as much on the vulnerability and adaptation side as they may otherwise like to do. I'm going to show you a couple of features of the Tribal Climate Health Project. Go ahead and advance the slide, Josh. This is the website. This is tribalclimatehealth.org, and we just invite you to go visit at any time. One of the functionalities that's here that's useful is a resource clearinghouse that provides over 500 resources, pieces of literature. Are you going to show it, Josh? It's sortable and filterable resource clearinghouse, all things tribal, climate change, and health related. And so if you are interested in incorporating health impacts into your climate resilience or climate adaptation work, this is a good place to go for information. Okay, there you go. So that's the resource clearinghouse, and then on the right you can see a lot of different areas where you can actually sort the type of topic or area or resource type that you might want to look for. Josh, while you're there, why don't you go back under Learn and pull up training materials. This is one of the key pages on this website. This is where we provide access to all of our previous training materials, whether it be presentations like this at conferences or meetings, or full trainings, which we have done. We've trained almost 1,000 professionals to date on tribal climate change and health adaptation topics. And so you can access full trainings as well, including on-demand online trainings. You can kind of follow along at your own pace some of the previous trainings that we have offered. So we welcome everybody to take advantage of those. There's one that's an 8-part series and one that's a 10-part series. And you can do that, like I said, at your own pace. And if you scroll down a little bit, Josh, one of the other things I want to point out on this page is an adaptation planning tool that we have developed as part of the Tribal Climate Health Project. It's called the Exposures, Impacts, and Strategies Inventory Tool, the EASY tool. It's really an Excel document that's kind of a glorified menu of all the possible exposures, impacts, and adaptation strategies that are associated with tribal climate change. issues. And so at some point, you know, there's other opportunities to get a demo of this kind of a tool, but really for folks that are at the beginning stages of starting their adaptation planning processes, we recommend taking a look at that Excel tool, because it provides, it does a lot of the work for you. You don't have to go look for all the different indicators and data sources to figure out what your key vulnerabilities are. So it's your companion to try to figure out what your key vulnerabilities are, and it also has a long list of potential adaptation strategies that can help you address the vulnerabilities that you end up identifying. So it just takes a lot of the work of doing that research off of your table. All right, go back to the slides, please, Josh. All right, next one. And you know, back on, yeah, go ahead. So this is the other kind of piece of the Tribal Climate Health Project. This is InterTribal Resilience Data Development Project. So this was funded the last couple of years also by the BIA. And basically what this is doing is taking that effort that I just talked about with the EASY tool, where we're trying to make data access more easily and readily available for tribes. We're improving the data that's available to tribe. We are building data sets with a variety of partners around the nation, and just basically trying to make it easier for you to complete your vulnerability assessments so you can do a more meaningful job of making decisions to make your tribe more resilient. And so we'll have some resources to share as that project continues along, but right now we are working in collaboration with 11 different tribes in Southern California on that project. Go ahead and advance. So Shasta, this one's for you. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what Shasta is doing at the Paula Band of Mission Indians when it comes to their own climate activities, not just those programs that she's leading on a national level.
So we're trying to, of course, take these tools that we've created, these reports and what have you, and rather than just being able to check off that box on our quarterly report or our annual report, actually put them into the community and do something with them. So one of the things we're doing in terms of our outreach to the Paula community is we've created a bunch of easy public-facing resources that tribal members can access through our website. And of course, we had plans for doing in-person activities with folks, and then COVID kind of put the stop to that sort of thing. But one thing that we're trying to focus on, besides the normal impacts in terms of, say, extreme weather events or heat or wildfire, is again to focus on people's psychosocial resilience as well as their physical health. And you know, that's something that's very specific and can be very personal, not just for individuals, but also for tribal communities, because there's different adaptations strategies that are culturally specific, different values that you need to take into account. But it's still important to perhaps start doing that work with your community to find out what are the stressors that might be related to climate. Things like being hot all the time, maybe not being able to afford the electric bill because you're running your AC more than you used to, or you're concerned about elders who maybe don't have access to cool zones, and it raises your stress. And these are things that can have an impact on your overall tribal traditions and culture, because maybe you can't do some of the things that you used to because plants aren't growing when they used to, or food resources aren't as abundant as they used to be. Those all have an impact on our psychosocial health. And so that's become an important thing for us to identify as something to look at in our continuing work. And then just briefly, the other things that are listed on the slide, there's creative ways you can find funding to do projects that are also climate related. So with the SB1 funding, which is through the California Department of Transportation, or Caltrans, we are doing a resilience plan that focuses on our transportation infrastructure. And strangely enough, for where we are, one of the biggest issues we have is flooding, when flooding and heavy rains sometimes make our roads inaccessible. And that's a climate related impact. So we're using that funding to develop a plan for improving our transportation infrastructure. Same thing with FEMA, these things are related. I think a lot of you know that if you want to get FEMA grants, you have to have a FEMA vetted and approved hazard mitigation plan. We've had one for several years, but we're going through an update. They have to be updated every 5 years. So you can always put climate work into those. And then with the Climate Science Alliance, folks in Southern California, a lot of you already know about the working group, the tribal working group, that I am, sort of the informal chair of that group. But we have representation from tribes throughout Southern California. We meet bi-monthly. In fact, our next meeting is this Thursday, and discuss what we can work on together, some of our key needs that cross and overlap, that we can leverage each other's strength as a group instead of trying to go it alone. So that's been a really great group, and it bums me out I can't see my peeps in person and give them big old fat Melody C's style hugs, but hopefully that time will come soon.
So Paula has been very successful and fortunate to get a lot of different funding to do this kind of activity. So to do all the planning, and then the planning sets a good foundation to be able to implement all of these great adaptation strategies, which they also got some funding for in different sources. So we invite you to go visit the Paula Environmental Department's webpage, and you can check out those materials that Shasta mentioned. And then one last slide, Josh, if you could advance. So San Pasqual and Rincon are also working with us on some activities. And so John on the phone here from San Pasqual, as well as Rincon, they've been collaborating on a couple of different efforts. One is they have actually been participating, as I mentioned, on that InterTribal Resilience Data Development Project that Paula is leading, and with BIA funding, we're trying to evaluate vulnerability indicators that can be useful for tribes when they're trying to assess their health vulnerabilities to climate change. And so they participated in that. They were able to get all of their initial vulnerability data analyzed for them through that process. And because they did that, then we went out collaboratively to look for some funding to actually complete the adaptation planning process, and they were successful at receiving an award recently from the BIA to collaborate on the completion of an adaptation planning process for both of those tribes, San Pasqual and Rincon. And finally, I think Josh is going to talk a little bit more about this effort, but Paula, San Pasqual, and Rincon are also collaborating on a recently awarded grant from the CEC Tribal Government Challenge that we mentioned, and that's for broader sustainability planning. But this is just giving you an idea of how successful some tribes here in the San Diego region are being at accessing resources and opportunities and really putting them to work to prepare themselves for the impacts of climate change. And
this is your official time check, about 30 minutes to go, maybe 28.
Great, we're all done actually, perfect.
Okay, great. Well, then we'll take it over from here. Moving on from climate to energy. I actually want to go back real quick, and just as a reminder, because several folks were not on here when we started, just regarding the California-specific tribal gap analysis, focusing on energy and climate change. And a few things I didn't mention about that as well, just as a reminder. Let's see if I can get back to there real quick. It does not want to let me go there. Anyways, caltribalgapanalysis.org, and I'll come back to it at the end as well. But this is a partnership between Prosper, UCLA, the GC Green, Sage Energy, and Shasta is also part of our team as well, looking into gaps in California in these particular areas. It's going to mainly be operated through a questionnaire that we're going to seek direct tribal input. And so it's all still in development, so I don't want to share too much until we have everything ironed out. But we do have some upcoming events that I'll be sharing at the end of the presentation too, that you can go to and sign up for to learn more. So focusing now on energy, I just first want to kind of run through just a kind of general energy planning related process for tribal energy projects. And, you know, these are probably for the larger projects, larger energy efficiency related, and also could cover more major transportation related ones as well. They're mostly project specific, except for the first one, strategic energy planning. I think any good planning process involves kind of broad consideration of overall goals and objectives, even to the extent that you want to focus on what's your energy mission and vision for your community itself. And your project should be flowing down from that strategic energy plan so you can prioritize what really is most important for your community to act on first, or at least prioritize first. So then when you actually move into the project, you're going to usually begin with your feasibility study. You don't want to get too far down the road until you determine whether or not it's feasible. And it's kind of an ongoing iterative process as well. You kind of do your preliminary feasibility study and your preliminary planning. And as you determine it is feasible and you get funding, then you can advance that planning and the feasibility analysis more in depth. If it is certainly feasible and and the tribe decides to proceed with it, then you're going to be seeking funding and financing, and I'll share some resources that you can consider in terms of funding energy projects. Another key step is likely going to be procurement. You may be in a situation where you're sole sourcing an energy project, or you may be running a request for proposals and getting competitive bidding. And that's a very important process to really frame. Just the whole contracting process itself is really important to go through. Should flow down from your planning, and you really want to be very clear with your partners, the contractors you're working with, in terms of whether it's either planning or implementation, what your kind of goals and the objectives should be, what the parameters, the requirements are for the project, and your criteria. Once you've actually secured a contractor for an energy project, you'll then move on to the development stage, which will involve your design engineering for larger projects, some environmental review, and permitting. That if it's a project involving a grid interconnection, you may also have an interconnection application and study like here in California, which can actually be one of the more lengthy aspects of a project. So it's good to start that process as early as possible. Once you get through development, then you move on to your construction and implementation. And that's really where you're starting to break ground. And John will share some exciting news about a project we're working on together in just a minute. And then once you complete the construction, you want to go through commissioning, ensuring that you are setting up the system properly, you're testing it, ensuring that it's functioning before it does go fully live. And that's sometimes an overlooked step that can avoid some issues, and then just ensure that you're operating and getting the energy savings or generation or whatever it is that you expect. And then from there, ongoing operations and maintenance, and then monitoring. You want to be monitoring for your energy generation, your savings, whatever the project is, to ensure that you're actually getting the performance that you expected, and if you're not, to understand why. And this is really a circular process. So, as you complete projects, you want to go back to your strategic energy plan, and hopefully you're moving forward with the next priority if you don't have multiple irons in the fire at that stage. John, you want to take a moment to share a little more about the San Pasqual tribal microgrid project that you recently broke ground on?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so we actually just broke ground yesterday on this project. We were awarded through a DOE grant as well as a Grid Alternatives private foundation grant that they had. And then the tribe put in the remaining funds for the match on this. And we are putting out, are you, okay. We're going to be building a microgrid for the government center here at San Pasqual. So what you're seeing here is our complete government center, our tribal hall, tribal admin building, police department, fire, housing, and education. We broke ground on the solar PV that's in the parking lot up there. So it's going to be carports with solar PV. We're going to trench lines to connect all of these buildings electrically into the battery storage microgrid. And we will have a backup liquid propane generator, for redundancy on the system. And this was due to a lot of the things that California folks are experiencing, which is the public safety power shutoffs. We're in a high fire danger area. We get high winds, so we get our energy shut off often, and we don't have any backup generators that we own that are large enough to support this whole complex in every building. So instead of using old diesel generators, that's the 20th century technology, we decided to use 21st century technology to solve a 21st century climate change type problem that we're experiencing. And yeah, we should be completely done, I think, with the project by December, I believe, if everything goes right on the construction timeline schedule, and we'll be firing this thing up in January of 2021.
And then going back to the key project steps, I would say, one of the, as I mentioned again, and I'll reiterate here, and it's been an issue on this project as well, is interconnection. And when you're working with your utility, you need their approval to interconnect with the grid if you have a grid connected microgrid or energy project that you're considering, whether it's a microgrid or not, then it's early, it's very important to work on that. And I think that's ultimately, I think we can get it constructed in time. It's a matter of whether or not we get the full interconnection approval on that. Any other kind of particular challenges you've seen throughout this project, John, that you think are worth sharing?
You know, I think it's been relatively smooth for Josh and I, but I think it's because we followed a good plan from the beginning, and that included getting all the stakeholders involved, not just the tribal departments that are getting this, but also SDG&E has been involved in the process, Department of Energy has been involved in the process. So, you know, making sure everyone has a seat at the table and listening to, you know, their concerns and trying to solve those concerns early and often, you know, help the project run very smooth. So yeah, I think we've been very fortunate with this project. We haven't ran into any large delays, and you know, anything that we did were kind of easy to overcome. Tribal police, you know, one of their concerns was cameras, because we have security cameras around our complex, and the PV solar, while it was great, was going to block their view into the parking lot. So, you know, we had to figure out a way to get cameras mounted underneath that for surveillance and security reasons. You know, lighting underneath those carports, because it gets dark in the wintertime here, and we don't want people going out to a darkened parking lot. So, you know, just incorporating those sort of things in early and often.
And actually, that's something that came up too, as we're investigating some of Paula's project options for solar and other options for their tribal admin building. That was actually the security department over there brought up that same exact thing, was more concerns about cameras. So, you know, I think lighting and cameras actually are something that come up pretty regularly, so something to consider. Just kind of briefly touch upon some other solar plus storage microgrid projects that we're working on, and these are, you know, certainly more complex energy projects involving a lot of things. John's was a lithium-ion battery with solar. This one is actually at Rincon, Rincon, Southern California. This one includes lithium-ion solar diesel generators plus 2 more newer forms of energy storage. So 4.8 megawatts of flow batteries and 4.8 megawatts of flywheel. And these projects are not quite where John's at right now. We're still in the kind of the planning procurement phase at this point, but this is going to be a very large, complex system, and using some of the funding resources that I'll discuss a little bit later on. And just so you don't get overwhelmed by this type of project, you know, certainly there are smaller types of projects, whether it's just solar, whether it's just a microgrid. I do want to point out that if you're considering a renewable energy project for your facility, you typically want to consider your energy efficiency options first. It can be more cost effective to reduce your energy consumption rather than seeking to add solar, but part of that depends upon the resources that you actually have available. If there's funding and rebates available for these types of systems, well, by all means proceed with that. And in California, there have been some significant funding and resources available for these types of projects, which, as I mentioned, I'll touch upon a bit more. And I mentioned the Paula administration complex microgrid that we've been analyzing and hopefully we'll be pursuing a grant application for with the next round of DOE funding. But this is, you know, an earlier analysis we did on this type of project. And, you know, here's the covered carports in the parking lot just south of the admin building. And again, you know, the visibility for cameras and lighting was something that was raised as an early concern. So I want to share some federal funding opportunities and resources with you for these types of projects: renewable energy, energy efficiency. They can also be transportation related projects as well. I would say, you know, kind of your first stop should be the Department of Energy Office of Energy Policy and Programs. They have a deployment grant that they've been offering usually on an annual basis. And they've actually offered 2 of them this year. The second one, I think due to COVID, has been delayed, actually has been postponed multiple times. So the latest was due September 30th, and they postponed the deadline to December 10th. Hopefully that does end up being the due date on that. So there still is an opportunity if you've not worked on this grant proposal, if you're still chipping away at it. But, you know, there should be another opportunity again next year, even if you can't catch this year. And that usually has a 50% or 1-to-1 match on that. And there can be some creative ways to be able to meet that funding opportunities. In the case of the Rincon project, we actually have a significant amount of state funding we're using to offset federal match. And if you're able to secure state funding grant funding for a project, you usually can actually use the match use the state and grant federal funding as match for each other to offset your entire matches, which part of what we're seeking to do there. The DOE also, Office of Indian Energy, also offers free technical assistance on an ongoing basis, and you can go to the website that's linked here in order to find and learn more about that. If you have a specific project that you're considering, they'll have folks from, let's say, the NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab, or another one of their offices support you in analyzing that type of project. It's also important to consider other DOE funding opportunities. I've had a lot of success in pursuing non-tribal specific funding opportunities, both with the state and federally. And, you know, the competition can be a little bit stiffer in terms of going against, you know, universities and other entities across the nation or throughout the state. But you know, if you have a good project that's going to be typically on the cutting edge of what they're seeking to do, or what the agencies are seeking to advance, then, you know, you have a very good shot. I find that agencies want to fund tribal projects, and sometimes they're now developing more and more tribal carve-outs for actually general funding opportunities. But
Hey,
one
Josh,
thing you can go to as well. Yep.
15 minutes to go.
What's that? Okay, great. Thanks, Suzanne.
Yeah.
So both the DOE and the BIA have links to kind of general energy-related funding opportunities, and you can use the PowerPoint that was shared in the chat box. And hopefully everybody did end up getting that, and it'll be posted to the website shortly. Both of those have links to interagency funding opportunities as well, and I'm going to mention some of those, but I encourage you to go to these and review them and just track them. A lot of these opportunities are recurring on typically an annual basis. So I mentioned the BIA, their Indian Energy, their Office of Indian Energy and Economic Development has 2 annual funding opportunities that you may be aware of. One of them is currently open right now. So their Energy and Mineral Development Program grants, which both Paula and San Pasqual both secured grants under, can be used for doing feasibility studies. And it's not just renewable energy. You can consider traditional fossil fuel energy resources. I would encourage you not to, but that's certainly up to you and what makes the most sense for your community. But that you can go to the website and find that there, and that's due at the beginning of December. And the Tribal Energy Development Capacity Program grant is more focused on developing tribal utilities and other capacity, energy-related, like programmatic capacity. That recently closed at the beginning of September, but again, it's typically an annual funding cycle, and so you can keep your eye open for it next year. And that last link is kind of their link to various tribal funding energy opportunities through various agencies and elsewhere as well. A few other opportunities you'll want to keep on your radar. The FEMA just released the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities grant program. This used to be the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and they kind of rebranded it. I have not actually dove into this yet, but I feel like there's more of an emphasis on energy-related infrastructure than there has been before. That's always been eligible under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, but you know, again, I think that may be more competitive now than it has been in the past. So I encourage you to pursue those opportunities. And we secured some planning grants for Paula under the last round. Actually, it was flood mitigation assistance, actually. And then a hazard mitigation plan update was actually the last round of funding we secured there. I don't have any direct experience in securing USDA loans, but they have the 2 in particular, Renewable Energy for America program, and I believe one focused on renewable energy. I think there's another one, renewable audits, or there's one that focuses on audits. They have grants and loan opportunities available to tribes. I believe the DOE and BIA may also have loan opportunities as well. And so there's also other opportunities beyond the REAP program with USDA. And they're trying to open opportunities up for tribes more and more. I had recent conversations about the Rincon project with them, and that was kind of a fallback option as an alternative to some of the private financing we were seeking. The Bureau of Reclamation typically annually offers their Water Smart Water and Energy Efficiency grant, and that's another one that the tribes in Region 9 should be eligible for as well. Often overlooked are US EPA grants. The pollution prevention grant programs can cover energy-related opportunities. Paula currently has an EPA P2 grant that we are helping them administer. It's the Tribal P2 Action Grant Program, or sorry, the Tribal P2 Action Project. And let me pull that up for you real quick so you can take a look, because this was focused on helping tribes do hazardous substances, energy, and water-related planning for tribal businesses. And we did a webinar series and provided other resources. So I encourage you to visit this website. We've just posted a bunch of resources here, and we'll continue to do so for that particular project. There is an energy planning specific webinar that's the recordings posted online for, as well as a roundtable recording that focused on energy storage. The P2, your pollution prevention, is actually an eligible category under your General Assistance Program grant. So that's also another means to be able to fund some energy related projects. And I think, Shasta, did you get gap funding for the solar for the transfer station? Or is that another funding source?
I don't remember, because that was actually before my time as environmental director. So it may have been from elsewhere, but it was funded as a small pilot. It was like 3 panels, but I do believe that was EPA gap funding, yes.
Yeah, and so, you know, in that case, that was I think implementation funding under gap for waste management, because it was for a transfer station. And so there's just, as I mentioned, just, you know, be aware of it. It may just be energy planning activities that are under P2 that you can kind of consider, but you may be able to actually perhaps install some energy related activity projects. We use GAP, which I don't think they would allow now, but we use GAP when I was working with the Chumash as their environmental director to open a waste oil recovery fueling station where we were recovering waste vegetable oil from the Chumash casino and using it to fuel vehicles for the Chumash community. I've been focusing primarily on building related energy, but you know, energy covers transportation as well. I included the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act grant opportunity that can be used to fund more cleaner, more energy efficient vehicles. EPA also has its Energy Star program and its Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is useful for helping you track and monitor your energy use and savings, and you can compare your usage to other buildings and facilities. And it's difficult if you don't measure it. It's hard to kind of track. It's hard to save energy if you're not actually tracking your consumption. All right, so shifting gears to California. California recently launched a grants portal similar to grants.gov, and that's another source on the federal side you may want to consider. You can set up alerts for various agencies and their specific categories, and you can filter for opportunities that are available just for tribes or that are eligible for tribal governments. But the California grants portal has the same thing where, you know, I pulled it up right here, and you can search by category. So you can click on energy, and then you can choose the eligible applicant and select a tribal government and hit go, and then you can see all funding opportunities from agencies in California available to tribes. So that's one resource in California. Empower Innovation has both state, federal, and other opportunities in California and beyond. So this was funded by the California Energy Commission. But again, it may be, if you're not in California, it may be worth checking out yourself. You can go to their funding opportunities tab and see what's available. And a lot of times this is including non-California specific opportunities as well. So the California Energy Commission has various grants available, and you can go to the website, it's linked here. Their electric program investment charge is actually ratepayer funds that those that are subscribed into their IOU territories, so SDG&E, San Diego Gas and Electric, Pacific Gas and Electric, Edison, those territories, you have a surcharge on your bill that goes into this fund that funds various clean energy projects. And another thing to be aware of in California, I don't know exactly where it stands right now, is California recently launched the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Project incentive, and that was funding free electric vehicle chargers throughout California, facilities in California. The applications may have been due very recently, or they're going to be due very soon, but we've had various contractors reach out to the tribes I've been working with about getting free EV chargers installed, both level 2 and level 3 at their facilities. Another one to keep in mind if you're in California, and this is actually, I would say maybe addressing Sarah Nave's kind of challenge she raised a bit earlier on in the chat box. She talked about that they're experiencing frequent giant wildfires, which is, happening all throughout California, and power shutoffs in her area. And, the challenge is keeping the power on or finding alternative power sources. So the CPUC, recognizing this, created an equity resilience budget category for their self-generation incentive program rebates. And that was actually, it's been funding free energy storage projects for homes and tribal government facilities that meet certain criteria, which is actually fairly broad. And it's been an exciting opportunity. The money in PG&E actually has run out very recently, but it's still available in SDG&E, Edison, and SoCal gas territory. So if you are a customer of any of those 3 IOUs, I would encourage you to pursue that opportunity. Separately, Prosper is working with somebody to get rebates in, so you're welcome to follow up with us regarding that as well. The CPUC also has a microgrids focused proceeding that does have a kind of tribal specific carve out. It's an evolving thing that I'm not too familiar with, but I'm going to be learning more, and that'll be part of a presentation that will share more information about that. I am aware that PG&E does have a specific tribal emphasis and funding available for tribal projects. Pilar Thomas is going to share more from Quarles. She's an attorney. She was, I believe, former Assistant Secretary of the Office of Indian Energy, and she's been following that proceeding. Is going to share more information in an upcoming presentation that's going to be sponsored on the California Tribal Gap Analysis Project. So I would encourage you to join there. And I also did list Strategic Growth Council. The Challenge Grant is one of the opportunities for tribes in California focused on energy and climate-related planning, but the affordable home, sustainable communities, affordable housing, sustainable communities is another thing that tribes are eligible for. Tribes can apply for, there's a transformative climate change or climate communities opportunities. So I encourage you to follow Strategic Growth Council and their opportunities, which are typically tribes are eligible for as well. There are various tools, particularly on the renewable energy side, you can use for analyzing these types of projects. I guess best free one would be SAM. It's a DOE tool, but there's various paper tools that I use on the projects that I work on as well. And again, you can come back to this for more information. I will also share, beyond the federal and state, you may want to consider private financing. For energy projects, you can consider a power purchase agreement or some type of arrangement with a tax equity partner where they can actually capture the tax equity benefits that tax liable entities are eligible for. We are considering that currently for the Rincon project. So in addition to the grant funding, we are seeking to bring in tax equity to further reduce the cost of the project to the tribe. And so, again, there's private opportunities, universities, other organizations may be able to help in supporting these types of analyses or somehow supporting your projects. As I mentioned, under the California Tribal Gap Analysis Project, we have 2 upcoming events in our calendar and more to come. And you can go to, I'll type it in the, actually Shasta or Angie, can you type in the California Tribal Gap Analysis URL? I'm hoping that the email sign up will be up very shortly. Our website just got launched on that, and I encourage you, if you're in California, to join our listserv. But we will be presenting a little bit about the project and an epic symposium coming up next Monday, and then we'll be going into more detail on November 10th regarding various energy and resilience opportunities and resources for California tribes. So we'll go beyond what we're doing now in more depth. So that's the end of the presentation. We have 1 minute to go. I have not seen any additional questions, but if you have any more, then you have a moment right now. You can raise your hand, unmute yourself. And if I don't hear any, then we can wrap up. So thanks, Angie, for putting the link to the California Tribal Gap Analysis website on there. And please, if you're in California, or if you just want to learn more about that, please visit it. And email signups are now live on the site, so fantastic. Please go there and sign up. I want to thank everybody for joining us. John and Shasta, Angie, Leah, and Tom. Well, sorry, Tom, you couldn't make it, but Leah, thanks for Strategic Growth Council. And we'll be sharing this presentation will be posted in the chat right now. But thank you for your time, and feel free to reach out with us with questions. And John, do you want me to